Yeah, I could see our screens filling in. This is all right. So, hey, everybody. Um, Real quick before we jump in, and just tell anyone that's catching this live or watching on a repeat, welcome to live stream for PM Square. I want to do a little bit of talking about data governance today. And as you can see on the screen, we got some guests here to help us explore that a bit. I know the title of the live stream is maximizing data value or something along those lines. Just a level set for everybody. No Python, right? No PySpark code getting shared today. We're not diving into to that level of detail. So if you're a real person, drop a comment. I will lobby for having a series of these to dig in deeper. But if you're not a tech or a tech person, or if you're kind of eyes glazed over when someone says SQL, don't worry about that. We're going to start at the top and dig in a little bit here and try to get some of the important topics covered and really set the stage for how to be successful. Excuse me. To that end, we do have some guests, as you can see on the screen, and I'm going to ask. I know Joe and Chris, you guys are going to do a demo for us, so that's going to probably come in a bit later. I don't want to give you short shrift, so welcome to the live stream. But Matt, I did want to start off asking you some questions, and I guess maybe the first question is to ask you to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure.
And I know you're from IBM, but you can clue everyone else in on that, right? And kind of what you do there.
Sure. First and foremost, Randy and PM Square, I really appreciate you, having us on the line today and having us for this discussion. It's really appreciate this opportunity. And like you said, I'm at IBM. I'm based out of Denver, and my current role at IBM is I'm one of the data and AI sales leaders where I have a focus in kind of data governance, and also some aspects of data lineage and working with some other items like data products. So really trying to lead the brand and the strategy of these products and ensuring that they're successful in the market.
Excellent. And I know I mentioned you guys will be on a little bit later, but Chris and Joe, if you want to just take a moment, go ahead and introduce yourselves as well.
Yeah, sure. So, hi, everyone. My name is Chris Murray. I'm a worldwide data lineage specialist on the data and AI brand at IBM.
And hi, everyone. My name is Joe Chmielewski. I'm a technical product manager here at IBM, specializing in data lineage.
Excellent. And I got a little bit of a sneak peek about what you guys are going to be talking about, so I am anxious to see it. But I think we'll set the stage a little bit first, if you don't mind. And, to set that stage and to really level set, maybe Matt, you can jump in and
Sure.
Just start with the basics, right? I've been around data a long time. I hesitate to say, but I jokingly, not jokingly,
Yeah.
I tell people I joined Cognos, business intelligence, later acquired by IBM. And one of my first jobs there was teaching classes and telling people we were going to be Y2K compliant. So then I give you an idea about how long I've been around this data and data analysis stuff. And it seems like the concept, certainly, of data being important has been around longer than that, right? So it predates me. But data governance as a kind of as a bullet point or as a buzzword, it's been around for a little bit, and it's recently kind of making a resurgence, becoming more popular, I guess, in keyword searches.
Yeah.
So maybe we should start off just by kind of defining what that means. And let's start off with that. Right? When we talk about data governance, what are we talking about?
Yeah, sure. I think it's a good way to start. We can kind of set the foundation for our conversation today, and then through kind of defining that, I can segue into why it's becoming a little bit more important and more of a priority. But again, to set that foundation, just kind of defining data governance at a high level, it's data governance refers to the framework, policies, and procedures that ensure an organization's data is accurate, it's consistent, secure, and being well managed throughout its life cycle. So this also includes defining who has authority and control over data, ensuring data quality, and managing data access to ensure it's being used properly. And I think to your point, data governance has always been around, But, I think a few things why it's becoming more of a priority right now. And I think first is, data governance 4 or 5 years ago, it used to be a very daunting task, and it still is. But I think it was a daunting task because, majority of the process and procedures used to create a data governance strategy and practice, it used to be very manual intensive. So it was taking up a lot of time and resources. And I think if you fast forward to today, there have been tons of advancements in this space. And most importantly, in my opinion, I think it's the ability to leverage automation and, some basic machine learning to, automate a lot of these tasks. So things like classifying and profiling structured data, auto enforcement of data protection rules, and things like, automatically assigning business terms to, add context to the data and much more. I don't think it's ever going to get to the point where everything's automated. I think we still need some human interaction to make sure that.
So we hope not, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But I think another thing that I've really been noticing in the market as to why, data governance is becoming a priority again is because of the emergence of, generative AI and large language models. I think after ChatGPT kind of released to the public in November of 2022, a lot of my conversations were no longer around data governance or around, databases or this or that, or kind of any of my area of expertise. And a lot of my clients were like, we just want to learn about generative AI. We just want to learn how we leverage this, what foundation models are, large language models. And I think there was this sense of, I just feel like everyone was like kind of in a craze. They're like, okay, kind of fear of missing out. They had some FOMO and they're like, all right, we got to immediately investigate this technology. How can we leverage it? How can we harness its power? So I think in doing so, by looking into it, investigating, organizations were, starting to do a lot of pilots and POCs and MVPs. And, through that exercise, I think they realized really quickly, hey, I need to get my data estate, my data architecture in line. I have data sprawl, I have data all over the place. It's not connected. I don't know who's the last to touch it. I have no traceability or lineage. There's a lot of kind of question marks around their data. Is this the freshest data? Is this the best quality data? And I think that becomes important because of a term that I like to use is like garbage in, garbage out. And to kind of break that down is, you can create the best machine learning model possible, right? But if your inputs, if you're inputting poor quality data or, garbage data, there's an extremely high probability that you're going to have garbage outcomes, and I think they realized really quickly, okay, I need to get good, strong quality data. But even more importantly, I think with things like clients starting to realize, hey, generative AI isn't 100% accurate. There's these things of hallucinations and so on and so forth. I think, the C-suite and the executives are starting to ask, okay, this is great. You use this model, you arrived at a particular outcome. Well, how did you get there? And, how did you arrive at this outcome? Can we trust this answer? Can we trust this outcome from this model? And I think that's where, being able to have things like Lineage and being able to provide that traceability and that explainability of how you got there is, super important. So I think those are kind of the two main reasons, just advancement in the space. And then also, generative AI coming onto the scene in the market, clients really realize, okay, hey, this is no joke. I have to get my, my data estate organized and in line.
Yeah, well, obviously, right. Anything you look at now is the words AI or Gen AI are gonna pop up.
Yeah.
So I've been at a lot of web presentations and live seminars and things like that where they're talking about how do we use this, how do we implement it, chatbots and 360 vision and all that stuff. One of the things that's been really gratifying is just what you said, is almost uniformly within a presentation about Gen AI, somebody will say it begins with your data, right? And there are several aspects to that, but what you're saying is just so true. It's kind of a resurgence in we need to think about this. I mentioned I've been doing this a long time, right? When we've talked about these concepts in the past, a lot of the feedback we get from customers or potential customers is, oh yeah, we need to do that, right? And it's kind of this, we know we need to do it. We know it's important, but here's what we're really calling in for.
Yeah.
And so it's really nice to see it getting some kind of frontline, right, emphasis, and people really buying into it.
Yeah, I couldn't
I
agree.
wonder to that end, right? And we talked a little bit before, so I have some idea of where we're going to go with this. But
Sure.
part of that top line emphasis of why do we want to do it is because, hey, we want to get into a Gen A project, and the people guiding us said we had to, right? So there's some of that, but there's some real benefit, tangible benefit, right, to the business across areas, and also some real risk if you don't take the stuff on, right? You mentioned the hallucinations, but it's more than just a little technical. So I wonder if you might dive into that a little.
Yeah, sure. So, again, like I mentioned, it'll be really difficult for organizations to be able to leverage, machine learning and generative AI to, be able to make those informed decisions if you have poor quality data and you can't provide that explainability as to how you arrived at that particular outcome. So, again, that's when it comes back to having a good, data governance posture or strategy to, ensure high quality, accurate data, and that, you're leveraging Lineage tools like Manta to be able to, explain how you arrived there. But to your point, there are other risks, like data security and protecting customer data. So, being able to mask private information like social security numbers, credit card numbers, so that, the data scientist or the analyst that's, working with that data cannot see that information. So you're being able to protect that information, ensuring it's not leaking out. It's I think that's, one of the more extremely important things, when working with your data. I think there's some other items like, with organizations, especially the ones that are in, very highly regulated industries like healthcare or finance, they need to abide by, certain regulations and legal requirements like, GDPR, HIPAA, CCPA, and, data governance, the practice of data governance helps ensure, compliance with these regulations and, help avoid really costly penalties. But I also think, some other risks.
So going to jail is a pretty big risk, right? You want to avoid that.
Well, that, and it's a little bit more than just kind of penalties and things like that. If you're not masking the data, if you're not protecting customer data, or you're not abiding by these regulations and things, you're going to get, some costly penalties and some other things. But I think more importantly is, the organizations, their reputation is on the line. If it gets out that, hey, this organization's been mishandling my data, or it hasn't been abiding by these regulations, it can be a huge blow to your reputation, in the market and with your clients. And I think that's more costly than any of the penalties and fees that you might incur. I would also say too, like, more importantly, like something that, I think having an effective data governance ensures that, data from different sources and systems within an organization is, properly integrated and, managed cohesively. I think this is a big one that I see a lot. A lot of my clients, they come to me and, one of the main pain points they have is, Matt, we have data all over. We feel like we're working in data silos, and, being able to have a good governance posture will really help eliminate these data silos. And I think by eliminating these data silos, being more integrated, being more managed cohesively, and having that data being organized and cleansed and high quality, it really helps with this idea of self-service, which is another space where clients are really trying to get to. And self-service is allowing your business consumers, your end consumers, to be able to find the right data at the right time, and being able to trust that data and know that this is good, high quality data. And I think, if you start combining all these things together, it ultimately helps with being, cost effective and being efficient. If you have poor data management practices in place, it's going to result in inefficiencies such as like rework, duplicated efforts, higher maintenance costs, because you're going to have to clean up and validate this data. And again, as you said before, not to mention, the legal penalties. So I think, so I think these are a couple of the main reasons, why it's important. And if you kind of think about it, like, it's being said in the market, data is the new gold. Well, if you can't find that data, if you can't leverage that data, if you can't trust it, how valuable is it really to you and your organization? So.
Yeah, I heard something recently I thought was really interesting. Is we talk a lot, you just spoke a little bit about, your reputation being on the line and customers need to trust you. I'll be a little bit vague. I don't want to give away industry or enterprises that we're doing this, but someone gave a presentation. We're talking about, we're rolling out a new Gen AI project. and they needed some data, but it wasn't data from outside. It was data from within the enterprise, but a different division. And they really had to work hard to get that other division to trust them, right? That they were going to be good stewards of that data and that it wouldn't get out. It was recipes and proprietary stuff that they were very carefully guarding. So that idea that you need to be able to show where stuff has come from, what you're doing with it, how it's being stored, where it's going, right? The whole lineage bit isn't just an external facing concern, right? It's an internal facing concern as well. And that, I'll sound old again, but you go back to Kimball and Inman to hear a single version of the truth, right? And get rid of those data silos you're talking about. There's all kind of ancillary benefit outside of Gen AI or machine learning to this data governance stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I think as well, I see with, a couple things, like one, going back to the idea of like, duplicating efforts and like you said, being able to trust other groups of their data. Like when I think of things like the architecture pattern, data mesh, where each line of business is ultimately responsible for kind of governing their data and how they use it and whatnot. A lot of times all these folks are still working in their own individual kind of lines of business. So I would call it like almost silos again. And, each line of business has a different level of strategy or practice when it comes to governing this data. And again, it's whether or not you can trust data from different lines of business. Are we duplicating work? Are we duplicating our data and copying and persisting more data? And it just ends up becoming kind of somewhat of a mess. You really need to kind of have this cohesive effort and working together to ensure that all the data you're working with is, up to par, quality, and trusted. So.
Yeah, and earlier you talked about one of the differences that we see now versus in the past is the ability to do some automation, right? And certainly tools have made leaps and bounds. But you hear things like, just to that point, you got different divisions and different silos. And if you just say, all right, we're going to handle that, we're going to buy, right, insert tool here. So you guys are IBM, right? We're going to, get a cloud account. We're going to have IBM Knowledge Catalog. Or we're going to get an AWS account and we're going to have a Glue catalog. We're going to do this kind of data governance. Here's the tool. There's the solution. I think that's really shortchanging the people that need that solution, right? Because it's great to have good tools, and certainly I want to champion good tools where they exist.
Yeah. But
it's really not the answer. And again, we talked a little bit before, so I'd like you to talk a little bit about what you explained to me with your acronym of PPT and how tools fit into that, but also what the non-T part of that is. What else goes into this besides tools?
Right. And, that's a great question and a good point to make, because I think there are some organizations that think, all right, we have this problem, this data governance problem or a data quality issue or what have you. And they think, all right, we're just going to throw a tool at it and it's going to solve all of our problems. But, it's a lot more than that. So PPT stands for People, Process, and Technology. And, this is kind of IBM's point of view and strategy when it comes down to, data governance practices and kind of the strategy that we like to share with a lot of our clients. So these three elements are intertwined and play a vital role in the successful implementation of a data governance program. And to better understand, let me just break down like each element, starting off with what I think is most important is people. So people are the driving force behind data governance. They're the ones who are, creating, collecting, and using and managing data. Therefore, it's essential to establish clear roles and responsibilities for data governance within the organization. And, this includes identifying, data stewards, data owners, data custodians, and each one has a specific responsibility for data quality, access, and security. And I think, in addition to defining those roles, it's really crucial to educate and like train the employees throughout the organization on the data governance principles and practices, because ultimately, like, this helps create a data literate culture within the organization where, employees can understand the importance of data quality, understand the importance of data security and compliance. I think it really helps with the overall, the overall community or the overall population of the organization to really understand, like, hey, this is why we're doing these things. There's a reason, there's a rhyme and reason to this. We're not just making you guys go through these extra steps.
Right.
We're not making you have to follow these certain rules and regulations. So I think that's the really important key part, is creating that culture and having that cultural shift. It's one of the more difficult things to try to achieve, but once you do, I think you're on the road to success. The next one is process. So process, provides the structure for, a data governance strategy or practice. It defines the workflows and procedures for managing data throughout its life cycle, from the creation to the disposal of data. This also includes things like data quality checks, access controls, data lineage tracking, and, data retention policies. Effective data governance processes, ensure that data is consistently managed and used in a way that, aligns with the organization's objectives and values. But again, kind of going back to some of the things we're saying with risk, it also helps prevent, data breaches, data misuse, and, non-compliance with regulations. Moving to technology, last but not least, technology, although you can't just throw technology at it to solve a problem, but technology still plays a critical role in, enabling data governance, obviously. Data governance tools and software, they provide the necessary capabilities to be able to, again, automate those data management tasks, monitor data quality, enforce those data access controls like we just discussed, and again, being able to track that lineage. These tools can significantly enhance, the efficiency and effectiveness of a data governance efforts and practice. So, and, I think where I see some clients is they kind of don't know where to start when it comes to, like, okay, where do I start on which tool am I selecting? And I think ultimately, the choice of technology depends on, the specific needs and requirements of that organization and what's a priority right then and there. So, and kind of in summary, to kind of wrap it up, like, on this point, like, data governance is, it's an ongoing journey. And I think that's something that clients or organizations kind of tend to forget. They think that, all right, I can buy this tool, I can put in a couple policies and rules in place, and can almost kind of, shoot and forget. But again, it's an ongoing journey. It's not a one-time project. You can't just install a tool and go from there. It requires, continuous monitoring, review, and adaptation to keep up with the pace with the ever-changing data landscape and the ever-changing rules and regulations. It's pretty important to do that and still maintain. And I think, by investing in the triad of people, process, and technology, organizations can really lay the foundation for a successful data governance program and practice.
Yeah, one of the things you just mentioned caught my ear because I had come across it recently.
Yeah.
Is it's fairly easy to understand why, like, taxpayer ID numbers, right? Why those have to be protected? Well, they're taxpayer ID numbers. But there are a lot of other things that need that same kind of care and attention. And one that gets overlooked a lot is, like, how long can you hold on to data, right? And different industries have different rules and regulations, but that idea that you have to get rid of data at some point gets overlooked quite a bit. And it really crosses over all three of your bullets there.
Yeah.
Because it requires people to understand it. And, be honest, right? A lot of data, we'd like to have full control over this, but a lot of it's sitting in Excel sheets on people's laptops. So those people need to know how to get rid of it. There has to be some understanding on it, just a employee or a personal level. The process has to be there so that people understand when that deadline approaches and when you have to dump things out. And then the technology can, of course, augment that. You can have life cycle management be automated, as you mentioned before, the automation before. But it really does cross over all three of those, and I think lends a lot of credence to the idea that they're all intertwined, right? And you really can't approach one without the other two.
No.
And expect to have a lot of success with it.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I think to that one point about, like, how long should you be holding on to, a particular data or asset is, I think it really comes down to the life cycle management. You need to constantly be monitoring the life cycle management. And I think ultimately it comes down to, is this data still valuable? Is it still needed right now for any of our strategies or any of our end goals or any of our objectives? And I think that's why you need to have continuous monitoring of your data and of that life cycle. And, I think also to your other point where you mentioned about, employees having, different data assets or data products on their laptops or Excel spreadsheets. I think that's where, going back to the point about people and kind of educating and building this kind of data literate culture within the organization ultimately helps, those employees understand like, oh, I have some sensitive information here. I should be smart with how I'm using this. I should be smart with how I'm disposing of this. So again, that's why I think it's pretty crucial to create that and educate, the broader group.
Just to be clear for anyone that's watching outside of us at PM Square, and I'm sure at IBM as well, we don't hold that kind of information on our laptops. Everything's encrypted. It's in safe spaces. I was talking in general, not about us. So we are good stewards of your data, I assure you.
Yeah, I mean, and kind of even to that point, I feel like it's like every 3 to 6 months, I'm doing another educational required education on, data security and working with data and, the right, procedures to be doing. So I definitely understand that.
Oh, okay. I know we didn't lose Joe and Chris, but they left the stream for a few minutes. I do want to get them back on. I know they've got a cool demo for us. Yeah. I wonder if we could set the stage for that a little bit. And when we talk about data governance, I like to talk about the coverage of data governance as it's really end to end. And you need to know where stuff is coming from and what you're doing to it. Then you get into the ETL and the Spark and all that jazz I was saying we wouldn't get into on this call. Yeah. You know, all the kind of technical machinations that you do to this data. And then where it gets stored, sure, but also how it's outputted, who's consuming it. Yeah. And really, you could start the data governance journey anywhere within there. And oftentimes it's at the database level, right? Because the DBA is saying we got to keep it safe. But it really needs to radiate out and cover it. And as I'm saying that, I'll do my check and make sure, right? Do you see that the same way, or do you have a different spin on that?
No, yeah, I mean, I definitely see it the same way. And I think, there's no more aspect that's more important than the other. But I think ultimately being able to know how your data is moving from source to target and, who's been touching that data, what type of transformations happen along the way. Is this the freshest, most accurate information coming through is why I push really hard for clients to really investigate data lineage. I think that's one of the more important aspects to it, obviously next to data quality. And that's why, I couldn't be happier that, IBM was able to be able to purchase Manta, which is, one of the leaders in the space for data lineage. And I don't want to steal any of Chris and Joe's thunder, but, should we get Chris in here to maybe add a little bit more color to that and kind of the importance of the lineage and Manta?
Yeah. Chris, let me set you up by saying, I think in a lot of places, when questions about data lineage come up, right, it's ask Joe or ask Jane, because they're the person that wrote the stored procedure in the database sitting in, the other office, and they know where it comes from. And that's kind of the end of the documentation, put it in quotes, right? And I think that's pretty obviously not the answer. But yeah, if you want to go ahead and just speak a little bit to the importance of making that data lineage not only known, but transparent to different audiences.
Yeah, for sure. And, you guys are definitely bringing up good points and kind of already touched on the importance there, being able to understand exactly where your data is coming from, then what's happening to it along the way, where it goes, who's using it, and being able to understand the life cycle across those data pipelines is just extremely important to not only meet, data governance practices for, a variety of reasons, whether it be, internal and external audit, regulatory compliance, data management practices, and building up that data literacy across the organization. It's just that, data lineage actually truly enables you to make those data-driven decisions, because you then understand we are using the right data. We know exactly where this is coming from. We know if there was a new transformation applied to this. So data lineage kind of gives you that interactive map and also keeps your organization up to date with the most up-to-date information for those data pipelines to ensure you're pulling the right data.
And Randy, if you don't mind, hey Chris, do you think you could maybe like dive in a little bit more deeper on, I think some organizations and some niche players in the lineage space think that just being able to provide that historical lineage, is suffice and just enough. But could you touch a little bit more on like the importance of like technical lineage and kind of other feature functions of Manta and data lineage, like impact analysis and so on?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so the core competency behind Manta has always been helping organizations understand exactly how their data is flowing from source through sophisticated intermediary steps all the way out to targets. So you have that end-to-end view. And the importance of having technical data lineage is that the code doesn't lie. That's where everything is going to be coming from. So you really want to have a grasp around those transformations and being able to then say, hey, we're going to be, modernizing our environment. We're going to be implementing new things across our pipelines. We need to be able to understand quickly and proactively, if we make a change to an upstream system, what are we going to break downstream? Or what are we going to impact downstream? Being able to proactively do that is so important because it saves so much time, resources, and at the end of the day, dollars for these organizations. And with Manta, you'll have that interactive map and UI, and Joe's going to showcase it for us today, where you have the ability to trace everything downstream and then do the inverse, see root cause analysis, do some of that history and compare two different points in time so you can understand how your environment's been evolving, and really utilizing the tool to answer all of your day-to-day data-driven decisions and questions that you may have about your pipelines. So I know with that, if you guys would like, I can pass the baton on over to Joe so that he can open up Manta and give everybody a show.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. I did want to mention or ask one thing for clarification.
Sure.
I think I've got it, but and I'll full disclosure, I have seen Manta, and I liked it a lot. That was one of the reasons I wanted to get the demo out in front of everyone here. In fact, I have my Manta, right? So I'm a Manta champion. But one of the things I like about it is you can see from a very high level, right? So if I'm sitting in, I don't know, the Office of Finance, I don't care about a stored procedure. I care that I have the right data and that I'm assured it's coming from a quality source. And so that gets mapped out. And I can see, it came from this system and it's showing up on this report. But if you're on the technical side and you have to track down a problem, and a fairly recent experience I had was tracking down something where different engines were using rounding rules differently, right? Which is not necessarily a high visibility problem, nor an easy problem to track down. But being able to get to that level of kind of code detail, which I think, Joe, you're going to show us here in a few, is also a really valuable bit. So, if anyone is watching and thinking, I don't want to go into this and look at code, there's value at the high level, but the ability to get into the guts of it as well. Now, if I'm wrong about that, again, tell me. But I think I got that right.
No, you're totally hitting the nail on the head, because what Manta allows you to do is take a look at things from different levels of granularity. Whether you are that business user who needs to understand, just the high level hops that data is taking to understand the ultimate source, you have the ability to do so. But then again, you can drill down into things. You can get into the weeds. You can see column to column movements, the attribute level information, stored procedure steps, transformation logic. If you need to get into that information, you have the ability to do so. And Manta is going to show you all of that with all those cross-platform hops, which is typically black boxes across an organization.
Right. All right, Joe, we've been putting you off too long here. So sure. I think we'll probably drop off the screen so you have as much real estate as possible. We'll let you share the screen. And if you don't mind, if something comes up along the way, we'll poke in with a question or two. But by and large, I want to give you free reign to run your demo.
Sounds good to me. So I'll go ahead and share this right now. So you should be able to see my screen. This should be the Manta Flow viewer. Is that correct?
Yeah, there we go.
Yep.
Very good. So what we're looking at here is called the Manta Flow Viewer application, and this is what you all would be presented with when your users log in to Manta. So essentially, we've gone into all these different disparate resources. We've extracted the appropriate metadata from them, and we've parsed them to generate the lineage information. And this is what was produced after that has completed. What you see on the left-hand side is our repository tree view, which houses all of the different assets grouped by their technology type. So if I wanted to, I could drill into something like a DB2 folder to see the servers that I've connected to for scanning. Within these servers, they house databases. These databases contain schemas. The schemas contain tables, columns, views, triggers, stored procedures, etc. So if I wanted to, I could traverse through the repository to find specific assets of interest for generating Lineage around, or I can use my search box up here at the top where I can enter in an object name, such as customers, and I'll search for that. Manta will return back a data set that matches the specific search criteria which I've entered. We can see there's a number of different results here. Now, this may be a little too many for your environment. Maybe you received one result, maybe you received 100 results. If you want to filter that down, we could do that with one of these filters. So I only want to see report objects. So now I'm going to filter this to show me all of my reports. Very good. If I click on this customer's report that matches my search criteria, I can get a little bit more information about it in the elements details view. This tells me the technologies associated with and a few other different pieces of information just to validate that this is in fact the specific asset I want to generate the lineage around. It is. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this little plus icon, and the customer's report just got placed into my selected for lineage bin here in the lower right hand corner. Now, if I wanted to, I could just click Show Lineage and Graph and we'd see the diagram, but I always like to take a quick stop at the visualization parameters section just to validate that my settings here are properly configured. For this first visualization, we'll just set this to a low level of detail, and what that'll do is it makes the visualization diagram as easy to understand and really consume as possible, as it condenses the lineage into a very easy to read diagram. And we have some other parameters here, which we can talk about a little bit later on if we have time, where it'll reduce the level of complexity within the flow for us even further. But for now, this all looks good. So we'll go ahead and generate the diagram. To do that, we'll click on the Show Lineage and Graph button right here. And Manta will go into its backend repository, query for that customer's report. There it is. And then pull back a list of all of these other objects from the repo that have that share data flow relationships with that chosen asset. So what we've done now is we're representing all of those objects with a series of these different boxes on our screen. These boxes are connected together with these lines and arrows, denoting the data flow direction from one object to the next. What you might notice is that some of these...
And Joe, I just want to pop in real quick here if I can.
Sure.
I got to tell you, the first time I saw this, I was so ecstatic that we were going to be able to use it. I've seen this diagram or this kind of diagram before, but it's always where you have to draw it manually, right? And using Visio or some other tool to put these boxes in place. And I know we didn't see all the extracts and whatnot, but this is all automated. You didn't do anything to kind of draw or author this diagram other than what we just saw.
That's exactly correct. So Manta, part of Manta's power is that we're able to connect to each one of these different technologies, and we're analyzing the underlying metadata, then connecting the lineage lines across those technologies so that your users aren't required to define that one object has a relationship with another, or even one technology has a relationship with another. But Manta is able to do that programmatically behind the scenes, and then your users just need to log in and they'll be presented with something very similar to this.
That's great. So if you start off just in your example here saying, hey, I'm looking at the customer report. You searched and found the customer report. And then my next question is, well, why is this number not what I expect? You've got it laid out on the screen here of exactly how that number is coming to you and what's being done to the data.
Exactly.
Which is awesome. I did want to ask a quick question, though, related all the way back to the beginning when I started talking to Matt about data governance, right, and why it was so important to secure this data. So now I'm in Manta and I'm looking at this data lineage. And how is Manta securing the data?
So Manta doesn't ever actually touch your data. So that's one point that I want to make sure is properly discussed. What Manta queries for is the metadata. So the John Doe, the Jane Smith, none of that information is ever touched or moved to the Manta server, but rather we're extracting the DDL, the stored procedures, the ETL jobs themselves, or the report kind of framework, so that we can pull that metadata onto the Manta server for parsing. So there's no actual data transmission. It's all at the metadata level.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that's really important, right? One of the, we go in and we start talking about, hey, we want to do data governance and it's really important to secure this. And you have to know what's going on. And then we start pulling it into another tool. It can make people nervous, but knowing that it's not touching the data, it's a real plus, I think. So I did interrupt your flow there. I apologize for that, but I thought those were some good points I wanted to make sure I understood correctly. I'll be quiet again and let you jump back in if you'd like.
No, those were great points. So I appreciate you interjecting there. That was fantastic, and feel free to do so if you think of anything else as we're going through this. So as you mentioned, though, we do have a number of different technologies. I do want to point that out. If you look at these object structures, so this kind of hierarchy of boxes, you'll see at the highest level, it'll give you the technology name. So here's Microsoft's SSIS. We have Informatica Power Center, Oracle, MS SQL, and SSRS. So we have 5 different technologies here. There's 3 different categories from ETL to relational database to reporting application. Manta is able to connect the lineage lines across all of these different technologies programmatically. Another thing that's worth mentioning is we generated this at what we call the low level of detail, meaning it's not giving us the more granular view, but rather we're taking like a 10,000 foot peek at how everything interacts. So really, what is this application SSRS doing from MS SQL, and how that information get into MS SQL from Oracle, etc. But from within the same view, we can drill into more of the specific details by just clicking on any of these little plus icons. And when you do so, you'll see the lineage diagram update to extrapolate out. Now we're seeing table level lineage. So before it was more or less schema and application. Now I'm looking at the table level flow. And I can pan over to the right-hand side and I'll still see that customer's report as it's sourcing from this MS SQL relational database table. If I click on any of these plus icons, you'll see now I'm exposing the column level of detail. If I kind of continue to go upstream and expand these out, you'll see I have that column level flow. And if I click on a specific column, you'll see the highlights begin to be applied both to up and downstream data movements. The upstream movements are denoted here in blue. That's tracking all the way back to the points of origin. And the downstream data movements are tracked here in red. That's going all the way down to the point of consumption. So Manta is able to identify and then visually track for the user exactly where the information is flowing. Another point of specific interest that I like to throw out there is if we look at some of these names, you'll see that we have L name here. It turns into name underscore last here, which turns into family underscore name here. So as this information is tracking from one table to the next, the column names are all being updated accordingly. Manta is able to detect those column name changes and connect the lineage lines accordingly without issue. And that's because we're reading the underlying code level, the underlying metadata level, rather than doing just name mapping across, or name matching, I should say, across these different assets. With that said, about reading the underlying code, we also have access to the underlying code if we wanted to give that to maybe one of our team members for reviewing. Maybe they want to understand exactly what's going on within a particular statement. So we can drill into the actual stored procedures here, see the column flow level of detail, but also double click on them. And now we're showing the underlying SQL. I know we mentioned earlier on that SQL kind of gives some people the shivers, and that's perfectly fine. But for those who are engineering focused and want to see it, we do have it here under the covers. Did I hear a question?
No, it's just trying to stop myself from interjecting again and saying this is great. But I like that journey from, somebody says, hey, I've got this report. Where does this number come from? And you've got a 3 or 4 box or 3 or 4 leap journey to explain that. But then if you're troubleshooting or you need to get into the details and nuance of it, this drill down that you just did is just spectacular.
Fantastic.
I mentioned I'm a fan before, but that's fine.
Love the feedback. Love the feedback. What's also helpful, maybe for those users who aren't as comfortable with the SQL engineering portions of it, is we have things called active tags to help identify specific areas of interest, particularly transformation logic that's been detected. Those active tags here are represented by these blue icons with the TT characters. If you hover over one of these blue icons, it'll actually show you the transformation logic, which was extracted from that stored procedure. So you don't have to read through the actual code itself, but you can read just the logic which went into that flow. So example, my rep client tables here. My rep client has a customer name column, which is being set to my party H table's first name column and family name columns concatenated. That's that logical expression right there. And you can see the flow. So here's my rep client table. There's that customer name column. I'm going to track the flow all the way back to my party H table. And there's the first name and family name column there on the left-hand side. So we just real easy identified exactly what the transformation went into, creating this particular field in this table, and then how that information was sourced from the party H table. Just keeping a look at time here. Are we all right with the time check?
Yeah, Angie said we could go over, so we're all good.
Okay, very, very good. So we've done a lot here around identifying or learning a little bit about how Manta is able to visualize this type of flow for a specific asset. But let's talk about one use case here, and that's what I want to bring up, something that we call revisions. So when Manta does this analysis of all these different disparate resources, we run the scanning of the metadata. We store the results of that, the lineage results of that, into our repository, and we kind of chalk it under what we call a revision. And what that revision is, how that your ecosystem looked at the point of that scan. That's helpful. And whenever you create a new revision, you create a new scan, you get a new version of your lineage. But we always store or have the ability to store those previous revisions in our history and go back in time and see how your ecosystem looked at those earlier points. So to just take a peek at that, go back to the previous screen, and we'll see that I have a revisions drop-down menu here, which allows me to choose one of those older revisions. If I go back, you'll see that my ecosystem now updated. It's quite a bit less technologies that I've scanned back here in 2018 compared to what it was in our current revision. Now, where this is helpful, the use case that we would leverage this for is identifying where changes were made in your ecosystem from one point in time to the next. You can do that in case you have maybe a broken data pipeline and you need to do a root cause analysis. That's when you want to take advantage of this revisions history component. We can even accelerate that further by using this compare revisions button. And when I click on that, what it's going to allow me to do is choose a current revision with a previous revision. So I'm going to select revision 15 from this list. And now whenever I generate a diagram, we'll choose that same customer's report. It's going to compare the lineage as it was at the current date to a previous date, and then highlight the differences for us. So I have that same customer's report, the two revisions selected here. I'm just going to show lineage in graph now, and we'll see what that looks like for us. Okay, very good. So what it's generated is that same flow that we started with, but now everything's been grayed out. We no longer see those blues, those salmon colors or anything like that. We just see these gray boxes. So Manta is denoting that these objects have had no changes made to them from one revision to the next. But in the center of our screen, you'll notice that there are some new little icons available, this green plus icon and this red slash icon, and then a lineage flow highlighted here in orange. So what Manta is directing our attention to is saying that when you compare revision 15 to revision 18, I've identified these areas as having changes made to them. So let's drill into them to see exactly what they are. So when I've drilled into this, you can see that I have a CRM client table, which houses a number of different columns. Some of those columns have this red font coloring and the slash icon, while some of the columns have the green font coloring and the plus icon. The red and the slash is telling me that these columns have been deleted or modified in some way, while the green and the plus is telling me that these have been added or updated. So what I can see quickly is that the data underscore birth, name underscore first, and name underscore last have been renamed to B date, F name, and L name. And now if I had a broken data pipeline associated with that customer's report, I can now direct my attention to these changes that were made and make sure that the SSIS job, which is pulling from them, is reflecting the new naming conventions of this CRM client table. I can go reach out to that SSIS ETL owner, give them the exact ISPAC and DTSX file names to say this is where we're locating the issue to potentially be housed. Could you please check the nomenclature references for the CRM client table assets to make sure that everything is functioning as we would expect. So yeah.
Yeah, I see. I'm thinking specifically of a engagement I was on, but I see a real use case for this when your ERP system has a major update, right? And some things might be obvious when there's a major update, and others may not. Like a data type change for a column, something goes from a varchar to a number or something like that. I'm guessing, but it's an educated guess, that Manta is going to be able to take a look at that maybe in a test system and compare that to a current prod system, and be able to help us identify what the impact or the consequence of making that upgrade is going to be.
Oh, absolutely. So we could, in a test environment, have those changes implemented, and then do this revision comparison to see what where those changes were completed, and then what they affected downstream in the test environment before it ever gets to prod, so that we can see what changes we would need to make to adjust and account for those new potential data pipelines that were created, or new assets that were added. And we can kind of take a peek preemptively at each environment to see, okay, how is this all going to play out when we do push this to prod? What exact steps do we need to take prior to that? And then once it's completed, we can also use the revisions comparison report to come back and show us all the differences, kind of to audit ourselves to make sure that there was no changes that were made which were unaccounted for, that we didn't otherwise know about beforehand. So there's a lot of opportunity to make sure that anything you're working on is well planned out, thought out, and properly implemented prior to ever getting to your end user.
Yeah, I almost always gravitate to the hands-on keyboard, right? This is awesome. It's going to show me what to fix. But I also have an eye towards the project management teams. And being able to see that out front gives them a lot more information to estimate time and effort and cost of doing these upgrades. So I could see a lot of value here in, like I said, the hands-on keyboard, where I just want to dig in and rewrite SQL or whatever. But also a lot of, say, higher level or enterprise value, being able to have better estimates and being able to save time, be able to identify problems before they get to production, and save that emergency downtime. So I see just so much potential when I look at this.
Exactly. You want to get ahead of the emergency downtime so you can limit that as much as possible. So yeah, this is kind of what I wanted to go through for the demonstration. I know we're a few minutes over. I apologize for that, but we'll be able to use just a few more minutes to see if there's any other questions or other discussions. I'll stop sharing now.
That was an excellent demo, by the way. Thank you for doing that.
Oh, thank you.
And we are a bit over. I guess I throw a name out there without telling anybody, but Angie is our backstage producer. She was the one that allowed us to go over. So thank you, Angie. Excuse me. And I think we've covered what I wanted to. I did mention before, we might kind of put the touch on you guys for a follow-up at some point, because there's so much more to this and so much deeper we can get. But for this particular live stream, I think it was just an excellent experience and a great use of time. Man, I appreciate your time answering all those questions. Chris jumping in. Of
course.
And Joe, as I said, it was an excellent demo. I appreciate that too.
Yeah. Well, I think we all appreciate the opportunity to come on here and have this conversation with you and kind of flex some of our capabilities with the Manta solution. So thanks again. Yep.
All right. Anyone watching? I think there's something in the comments, but if there's not, you can always reach PM Square. PMSquare.com. It's our website. PM Square. I think it's contact@PMSquare is the generic email you can use for that. If you want to get to me, I'm Randy. I'm at R. Dawson Senior, R. Dawson SR @PM Square, and feel free to reach out. Other than that, I think we can call this a wrap, guys. Thanks again. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Randy.
Thank you so much.
See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.